I'm sorry. It's over, DeSantis, bros. I gotta call it here. DeSantis has been slipping in the polls significantly. He was seen at first to be the only person who was potentially competitive against Donald J. Trump. And it's fine to want someone other than Trump. I wouldn't mind if someone other than Trump was the nominee. I've never been fond of the cultish loyalty to Trump. I could forgive it somewhat if Trump was slavishly loyal to his friends, but I think his administration was proof positive that he is by no means a loyal person. But anyway, that aside, there are a lot of options to choose from if you are a voter who is interested in voting for someone other than Donald Trump. We've got a clown car filled with like 15 different clowns, just like 2016. And none of them seem to be able to get off the ground. DeSantis was the one hope that people who wanted an alternative really had. He seemed to be holding there in the 20s or even 30s, although I never really saw him with one in the 30s, but let's just say there was one. And by 30s, I mean like 30 even. But high 20s is the highest I've seen in it. And we're talking the early primary states. I'm not talking national primary. That doesn't really matter. You know, what matters are the first few states, because people in the later states in a primary, they don't start paying attention as much until the primary is right on their doorstep, because what happens in the early primaries, particularly the first three states, Iowa, New Hampshire, South Carolina, that is going to impact public perception massively. That's when you start to see mass dropouts of the campaign. People who get trounced in Iowa and New Hampshire, they call it quits because not only does the money dry up, but they themselves are incredibly demoralized. You know, some of them try to hold out hope. Okay, maybe the polls are just, off by 20 points, and I can actually win. And then once there are actually numbers on paper, once the caucus results and the primary results are turned in those first couple of weeks, they realize it's over. But most of the time, we outsiders, those of us who don't have an emotional stake in the battle, which I really don't, I would not feel one way or the other if DeSantis or Trump or even this Ramaswamy guy, if any of them won the nomination, I'd feel fine. Now, I would have a bit of an emotional reaction if Nikki Haley somehow was nominated, or Asa Hutchinson, but we know that's not going to happen. But at this point, it looks like it's not realistic for anyone other than Trump to come away with this nomination, because DeSantis increasingly is more competitive with the rest of the field than he is with Trump. He is closer, especially in, my gosh, I mean, if you thought that Fox News was, going to turn on Trump and was going to, because, they've gotten rid of their most pro-Trump host, certainly, in the form of Tucker, they've tried to replace him with people who are more mild-mannered, more traditionally Fox-oriented, or even outright liberal. Fox has been exposed now for matching donations to the Satanic Temple. That's what you support, by the way. When you watch Fox News, they're taking that money that you're putting in their pocket by watching their TV, by watching their channel, and thus generating ad revenue for them. They take that money and they put it in the pocket of Satanists. I mean, literally, I'm not a church-going person, but if I was, I don't know how you ever turn on Fox News again knowing that that's what you're paying for. It's not just, oh, these people are sinful, or, they don't believe in the right theology. They outright support Satan. Fox News has taken a position in the spiritual battle against you. But anyway, that's another topic for another day. Getting back to the poll, and this is just one poll, but this was a Fox poll in 3 different states. In all 3 of these states, they have one thing in common. You have Trump, and then you've got everybody else. It's no longer you have Trump, DeSantis, and everybody else. You see Trump, he's got his support, he's got his supporters, Then you see DeSantis and the rest of them. Hell, DeSantis is third in South Carolina. Now, granted, there are 2 South Carolina natives in the race, but those 2 people should not appeal to a Republican primary voter. The kind of person who's going to vote for a Trump or a DeSantis is not going to have any interest in a Nikki Haley or a Tim Scott. You know, I mean, if that's like losing to Lindsey Graham in South Carolina. Yes, you know, he is from South Carolina, but it's Lindsey Graham. Everyone hates him. He's just too far burrowed into the system to ever excise. I think Donald Trump has less and less reason to show up at the debate in August, and it can really go either way for him. It's a gamble one way or the other. People say, you know, gee, if he doesn't show up, well then, you know, that's just giving a, you know, free platform to DeSantis to trounce all over the lessers in the race and set himself apart as really the superior candidate who can take on Trump. But I think that for this gamble to go against Trump in that way, to work out poorly for Trump, DeSantis would actually have to overperform. He would have to overpower these other guys. He would have to make himself seem like the real adult, like the big man with broad shoulders and bulging muscles. But I don't think that, you know, the TV debate thing, I mean, the TV debate format is a joke anyway. You don't actually debate anything. It's just fighting with moderators. I mean, that's really the way that you excel in these things. You don't actually, if you're actually trying to go in and talk about issues, you're going to lose, because this is not an issue-based debate. That's not how TV debates work. You go into a TV debate, you want to pick a fight with the moderator, and you want to whoop them. Don't focus on the other people on stage unless they say something dumb and you make fun of them. That's the only way to handle these situations. But in DeSantis' case, in the past, I've not seen him excel particularly well in these TV debates. I mean, he gets through them, but he's never, you know, I mean, with Charlie Crist, that guy, that wasn't much of a, that wasn't a fair fight against Charlie Crist. I mean, Charlie Crist is not, he doesn't put up a fight. I mean, the guy's been, his career has been dead for like a decade. And so I could see certainly someone like Vivek, who is only at like 4% in a lot of these polls. When he gets in front of people, I think he comes across well. I said, I don't know if I mentioned this on this channel, but it was last Friday, not this past Friday, but the one before, when they had this big summit with all the religious leaders in Iowa. Vivek, who's not a Christian, I thought was the best performer at the whole place. I think that he did excellent as far as just how he came across, how he sounded, very natural. He was, you know, in tuned on everything. He didn't have to dodge questions like everyone else. And so I think he would probably do the best in the August 23rd debate. And so if DeSantis underperforms compared to a guy who's at 4% in the polls, DeSantis isn't going to look more competitive with Trump. He's not going to stand out above all these guys. DeSantis is going to be cemented in his position at the kids' table. Because remember in 2016, there were so many candidates they couldn't fit them all into one debate. So they had the main debate, which was for all the top-tier candidates. And then they had what was called the undercard debate, which was the first round that they did early and that nobody watched, that had all of the guys who were like 1 or 2% in the polls. And they cut off the, for the second of the round of debates, Fox, I think it was Fox, cut off the top tier debate at a level that, you know, just barely kicked Rand Paul into the undercard. And Rand Paul refused to show up. He said, I'm a top tier candidate. I'm not going to play second fiddle to anybody. I refuse to go on stage if they're not going to put me on, you know, on the main thing. And he got a decent amount of press because of this. And, you know, lo and behold, his poll numbers after this debate went up, not down. His poll numbers went up, and then by the next debate, he was back on the main stage because he didn't lower himself and submit to being a second-tier candidate. Trump, as being the far and away frontrunner, by refusing to show up to this debate, he is de facto demoting everyone who does show up to the debate as being a part of the undercard. They are the second tier, all of them. And so at this point, it almost would be smarter for Desantis to refuse to debate if Trump does. Because Desantis could say, hey, I don't think that Desantis actually has enough popularity to do this, but if Desantis was truly a potential challenger to Trump, he should do the same thing. He's going to say, well, Trump's not going to be there. I'm not showing up because Trump is the only one, who is competitive with me. But that's not true. As we see, DeSantis is polling third in South Carolina, and it's not a close third. It's a distant third. He's like, 35, 40 points behind Trump. It's not like the top three candidates are 25%, 22%, 20%. And so I'm going to guess ahead of time, even though we are about a month out from the debate, which originally was scheduled for August 23rd, although I think they've moved it down, or moved it around, like it might be like the 25th or the 24th now. I think that DeSantis is going to come out of that debate weaker, because I don't think he's going to be the strongest one on the stage. And if he's lowering himself to their level, if he's going to be looked at on a level playing field with all these other people, it truly is going to be whoever performs best that will come out on top. Now, could Vivek totally choke? Yes. And is there anybody else on that stage who I think, in this kind of environment, could look better than DeSantis? Probably not. I don't see Haley or Scott, they might not self-destruct. I don't think they will. I think that they proved that last, couple weeks ago that they can, they know how to keep their cool and not say anything that will completely grenade them. But anyone who knows who they are already is not going to be interested in Haley or Scott. And they're certainly not going to be a stunner. They're not going to impress anyone. Mike Pence will be a disaster. Asa Hutchinson, if he is in the debate, will be a disaster. They have both proved that. If they put Larry Elder in the debate, he could do probably pretty well. I mean, he was a radio host. So, Larry Elder is a good talker. But anyway, you see my point here. Every these people that I'm talking about, they are low-tier, no-name candidates. And so for DeSantis to come out ahead here, he's going to have to thoroughly trounce these people and embarrass them. And I don't know if he has it in him. And so this is a gamble. People always talk about how it's a gamble for Trump. It is a gamble for both Trump and DeSantis. Both of them are taking a risk in their decision. And I think it's going to be a pivotal night. It's going to show if DeSantis truly has any life left in him, or if he should just drop out now. Because if he is, muddling around at 10%, with no hope, with no potential to perform and to really stand out, it's just going to be a ghost campaign. It's going to be like Rubio after New Hampshire. Matt Drudge called it the amazing shrinking campaign. And then he photoshopped Marco Rubio as a midget. Now, I'm talking obviously a lot about DeSantis here. And you might be saying, well, gee, it's not DeSantis, who is the worst performer here. There's a lot of people at 1% and 2%, 4%. Why don't they drop out? Why should DeSantis drop out? And my answer for that is that these people know they're not going to win. They have no intention of winning. DeSantis, we're told, is a real candidate who's actually running to win. It's not just a vanity run. He's not just trying to sell, some book. He's not just looking to grandstand. He actually wants to be president. Asa Hutchinson knows he's never going to be president. Mike Pence knows he's never going to be president. Vivek Ramaswamy knows he's never going to be president. They have different... Chris Christie, all these people. They know they're not going to be president. I think Tim Scott and Nikki Haley are actually deluded enough to think that. I think they're trying to raise their own profile. They think that they actually could be president, but they want to raise their own profile by running in this campaign. DeSantis has nothing to gain by running for president other than actually being president. He already has a national profile. People know who he is. And so these other people, since they already understand that they're not going to win, they have no real reason to drop out. And so I don't think they will until after Iowa and New Hampshire. But by that point, it'll be too late, because you see, Haley and Scott will not drop out until after South Carolina. And so if DeSantis is polling at the same level as them, he's got no chance. By the time that all the unserious candidates are out of the way, Trump will have locked in the nomination. It's easy to say, oh, Trump's below 50%. He's below 50%. That means that there's a majority of people who want a candidate other than Trump. Okay? Even if that's true right now, even if it's true that if every other candidate dropped out, except for DeSantis and Trump, that all of the non-Trump vote currently would go to DeSantis, and that he would have over 50% in the polls. Even if that were true, after Trump wins Iowa and New Hampshire, if he wins Iowa, I haven't seen a poll that shows DeSantis being particularly competitive in Iowa. And, again, Iowa is another thing. If DeSantis can't pull out a win in Iowa, it's game over at that point. And as of right now, that does not look realistic. So if Trump wins Iowa and New Hampshire, and then a bunch of people drop out, and all that's left are the two South Carolina candidates, Haley and Scott, plus DeSantis, the dropout vote, the people who would have voted for a bunch of those undercard candidates, they're not all going to go to DeSantis. Some of them are going to go to Haley, some of them are going to go to Scott, some of them are going to go to DeSantis, and some of them will go to Trump. Because just because Trump's not your first choice doesn't mean he isn't your second choice. I bet you there are some people who have Pence first, Trump second, because Pence was Trump's vice president. And they might think, Mike Pence, I remember that guy. I liked him. He was nice and calm. He'd make a good president, that? And then Pence drops out and they go, I guess I'll just vote for Trump. There are people who think like that. All of these people who are supporting candidates who aren't Trump, they're not rabidly anti-Trump people. They're not looking to get Trump. They're not trying to throw Trump in prison. They're just open-minded, and they see other people, and they say, yeah, that person seems like they'd make a good president. Why don't we give them a shot? But what most of these people who are not voting for Trump currently have in common is that their first choice is not DeSantis. Given that someone is willing to vote for a candidate other than Trump, their first choice overwhelmingly is not DeSantis. It's someone else. Now, a lot of them might have DeSantis as their second choice, but we don't know how many. And I would not assume it's 100% of them. And so that, combined with the momentum of Trump winning 2 states and being a former president, people, when it comes to these sorts of elections, they like to bandwagon and vote for the winner, the person who they think is going to win. And a lot of people will decide to vote for Trump in the primary just because they think he's going to win. They might not even admit to that. They might not even realize it. But psychologically, that's how this works. That's why people gain momentum by winning in primaries. And so I think that this primary will be over by South Carolina. Haley and Scott are definitely going to stay in until their home state goes, because it's only third. And if DeSantis loses 3 states in a row, what the heck is he doing? What's he doing in the race? Jeb Bush understood this. Jeb Bush was the front runner early on, before Trump ever announced in 2015 that he was running for president. Jeb Bush was heir apparent to the Republican nomination. He was expected to be the next Mitt Romney. And he gave it a shot. He took it on the chin in Iowa, took it on the chin in New Hampshire, and after South Carolina, he said, guys, what are we doing here? I just lost 3 states. I'm not going to keep going. There's no point. And so he hung up his hat, and he said, that's it for me. And he bowed out like a man. He didn't scream about how we're going to win Ohio like John Kasich. who literally only won Ohio. But for some reason, he stayed in the race, hoping that at the convention, the electors would defect, or the delegates would defect, and they would all vote for Kasich. So I don't say this with glee. I'm just trying to analyze things somewhat objectively. I'm trying to read the tea leaves here. Now, is that ever a smart thing to do in politics? Just try and read polls and go, I think he's done. No, but it's fun. So with that said, I will see you folks back here tomorrow.